Most people believe the US dollar is permanent, unshakable, untouchable. It's in your wallet, your bank account, your salary, and your savings. But what if the dollar you trust today quietly loses its power tomorrow? What if the biggest financial shift of our lifetime doesn't arrive with a crash, but with silence? Today, we're asking a question almost no one wants to face. Could the US dollar actually fall by 2030? And if it does, will anyone warn you in time? Before we go any further, if you care about allowing the truth behind money, power, and the global economy, take a second to like this video and subscribe to The Financial Truth. It helps this channel grow, and more importantly, it helps this kind of content reach people before it's too late. To understand the future of the dollar, we first need to understand why it became so powerful in the first place. After World War II, the US was the strongest industrial nation on earth. Its factories were intact, its economy was booming, and the rest of the world needed stability. That's when the dollar became the center of the global financial system. At first, it was backed by gold. Every dollar represented real value. But over time, that promise quietly disappeared. In 1971, the US removed the gold backing completely. From that moment on, the dollar was backed by something very different. That trust lasted for decades, not because the system was perfect, but because there was no real alternative. Oil was priced in dollars. Global trade was settled in dollars. Central banks held dollars as reserves. If a country wanted to trade with the world, it needed dollars. The system gave the US enormous power. It could print money, run deficits, and still borrow cheaply because the world kept buying its debt. But here's where the cracks begin to show. Today, the US debt is over $34 trillion and rising fast. That number is so large it barely feels real anymore. But debt is not just a number, it's a promise. A promise that future income will be enough to pay for past spending. And more, that promise is starting to look fragile. The US spends more than it collects in taxes. The gap is filled with borrowing. To keep the system running, the Federal Reserve creates liquidity, lowers interest rates when things break, and steps in whenever markets panic. This keeps the system alive, but it also quietly weakens the dollar. More dollars in circulation means each dollar buys less over time. That's inflation. And inflation is not an accident. It's built into the system. Now enter China and the BRICS nations. For years, they watched this system from the inside. They traded in dollars, stored dollars, and depended on US-controlled financial rails. But slowly, something changed. Sanctions became a weapon. Assets were frozen. Trade restrictions increased. And countries began to realize that relying on the dollar meant giving up control. China started signing trade deals settled in yuan instead of dollars. Russia began selling energy outside the dollar system. BRICS nations started talking openly about alternative settlement systems, shared currencies, and gold-backed trade mechanisms. None of this replaces the dollar overnight. That's not how financial systems collapse. They erode. Central banks around the world have been quietly reducing their dollar holdings and increasing gold reserves. Gold doesn't depend on any government. It doesn't require trust in policy or politics. When central banks buy gold, they're sending a message, even if they never say it out loud. They're preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer the only anchor. At the same time, US interest payments on debt are exploding. Higher rates mean higher costs. Eventually, the government faces a brutal choice: cut spending, raise taxes, or print more money. History shows which option governments choose. And every time they do, the value of the currency pays the price. Here's the part most people misunderstand. A dollar collapse doesn't mean the dollar disappears. It doesn't mean chaos in the streets overnight. It means gradual loss of purchasing power. It means higher prices, weaker savings, and more financial stress for ordinary people, while assets inflate for those who already own them. The system doesn't break loudly, it breaks quietly. Could this happen by 2030? It's not a prediction, it's a risk, and that risk is growing. The dollar's dominance is being challenged not by one event, but by many small shifts happening at the same time. Debt levels, geopolitical tensions, alternative trade systems, and declining trust all move slowly, until suddenly they don't. What makes this moment different is coordination. In the past, countries acted alone. Today, groups like BRICS represent a large portion of the global population, production, and resources. They don't need to destroy the dollar. They just need to reduce their dependence on it, and every step away weakens the system that once felt invincible. For the average person, this raises uncomfortable questions. What happens to savings held in cash? What happens to wages that don't keep up with inflation? What happens when asset prices rise faster than income? These are not future problems. They're already happening. And they are symptoms of a system under strain. The truth is, financial power shifts have happened many times before. The British pound once ruled the world. It felt permanent too, until it wasn't. The dollar replaced it, not because the pound failed overnight, but because the world changed. And change never asks for permission. Here at The Financial Truth, the goal isn't fear, it's clarity. Understanding the system doesn't mean betting against it. It means seeing reality without illusions. Whether the dollar weakens slowly or faces sharper shocks, being informed is the only real advantage regular people have. As we move closer to the end of this decade, the question isn't whether the global system will change. It's who will be ready when it does. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it often rhymes. And right now, the rhythm feels familiar. If this video made you think, share it with someone who still believes the dollar can never be challenged. And I want to hear from you. Do you think the US dollar will still dominate in 2030? Or are we already watching the beginning of a new financial era? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Conversations like this matter more than ever.